When the phone rang that night, I almost didn't answer. The wind outside was howling against the windows, carrying the sound of the sea even though we lived miles inland, as if the waves themselves were whispering a warning I couldn't yet understand. I had just finished saying my nightly prayers when the screen lit up with my son's name, Captain Elias Morales. My heart, as always, fluttered with a mix of pride and worry. My only son, the boy who had grown up collecting seashells and maps, now commanded one of the largest merchant vessels crossing the Atlantic. I smiled, ready to hear his steady voice that always calmed me, but what I heard instead froze my blood. "Mom," he said, his voice trembling, "it's impossible. She's here. She's on my voyage, not at home." For a second, I didn't understand. "What do you mean, Elias?" "Who's there?" I asked, holding the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. There was a heavy silence on the line, broken only by the sound of wind and metal creaking in the background. "Mom," he said again, slower this time. "Lydia, she's on the ship. I saw her with my own eyes." I gasped so hard it hurt. "That can't be, Elias. Lydia is here. She's been here all week. She came over this morning, remember? She brought me soup and your childhood photos. She's at home." He didn't respond at first, and I could hear the disbelief in his breathing. "No, Mom, I just spoke to her here. She came to the bridge. She's wearing that blue coat you gave her for Christmas. She's helping the cook prepare dinner. I don't understand what's happening." I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself, the room spinning slightly. Lydia was my daughter-in-law, married to Elias for 3 years. Sweet, patient, and loyal. Or so I believed. She had always been like a daughter to me. I thought back to the quiet afternoon just hours ago when she had sat in my kitchen, smiling softly as she folded napkins for my church luncheon. She had kissed my cheek and said she would return tomorrow to help me clean the attic. There was no way she could be on that ship. It was a week's voyage away from any port. "Elias," I whispered, "listen carefully. Lydia never left town. Maybe it's someone who looks like her." He sighed, frustrated as if I wasn't understanding. "Mom, it's her. She called me by the nickname only she uses, Mariner. No one else knows that. She knew about the scar on my shoulder, about the song we danced to at our wedding. It's her." "But how could she be in 2 places at once?" I sank slowly into my chair, trying to steady my heart. I didn't know what to say. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them comforting. I wanted to tell him it must be a mistake, that he was tired, that the sea played tricks on a man's mind. But something deep inside me, a mother's instinct perhaps, whispered that this was no simple confusion. "Elias," I said softly, "come home as soon as you can. Don't confront her yet, just observe. Please promise me." "I will," he said, and then the line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the silence pressing in from all sides. The clock ticked softly in the background. I turned to look at the window, where the reflection of my own pale face stared back at me. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the branches of the old fig tree that Elias used to climb when he was a boy. I thought about Lydia, her gentle eyes, the way she smiled when she spoke about Elias's voyages. Could she really be living a double life, or was something beyond explanation at play? That night, I barely slept. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw the image of Lydia standing on a deck somewhere far away, the sea wind in her hair, while another Lydia sat quietly in my living room, sipping tea and smiling as if nothing were wrong. The next morning, I decided to visit her. The sun was weak, hidden behind gray clouds. When I arrived at their house, Lydia was in the garden, trimming the roses. She looked up and waved when she saw me, her expression warm and genuine. "Good morning, Mama Elena," she said, using the affectionate title she'd given me since the wedding. "You look tired. Didn't you sleep?" I studied her face carefully. She looked the same as always. No signs of deceit, no shadow of guilt. "I couldn't sleep," I said quietly. "I was thinking of Elias." She smiled. "Oh, me too. He called me yesterday before they lost signal. He said the waves were calm." My heart skipped a beat. "He called you?" "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "He told me he missed me. Why do you ask?" My throat went dry. Elias had called me last night, saying she was with him on the ship, so either one of them was lying or something unimaginable was happening. I forced a smile. "Oh, nothing, just wanted to check on you." She invited me inside, and as she poured me tea, I noticed something strange. On the kitchen counter was a folded navy blue coat, the same one Elias had described. I felt a chill. "That's the coat you wore yesterday?" I asked. "Yes," she said, glancing at it. "I meant to wash it, but forgot." I nodded, trying not to let my hands tremble. If she had it here, how could she be wearing it on the ship? As I drove home, the road blurred through my tears. I didn't know if I was losing my mind or if the world around me was shifting in ways I couldn't comprehend. That evening, I went through Elias's old things in the attic. Among the dusty boxes, I found a small wooden chest that once belonged to my husband. He too had been a captain before the sea claimed him. Inside was a faded journal with his handwriting. On the first page, he had written, "The sea keeps the truth beneath her waves. And sometimes she sends it back in ways we cannot understand." I shivered. Was this one of those times? The following days were a torment of uncertainty. I tried to keep myself busy with chores, attending morning mass, watering the geraniums, but my mind kept circling back to Elias's words. Each time the phone rang, my heart jumped, hoping for his voice. But it was always someone else. The neighbor asking about the church fundraiser, my sister calling from the city, or the pharmacy reminding me of a prescription. Every ring that wasn't Elias's deep voice felt like a disappointment that sank a little deeper into my chest. Lydia came by twice that week. She looked radiant, as if life was blooming inside her instead of turmoil. The second time, she brought a basket of fresh bread and asked me if I wanted to join her for a small dinner she was planning for Elias's return. "He'll be home by next Tuesday," she said cheerfully, "and I want everything to be perfect." I forced a smile, my stomach tightening. "That's lovely, dear," I said, though part of me wondered if the woman standing before me was really the Lydia I'd known all these years. That night, unable to quiet my thoughts, I found myself on the porch again, listening to the distant crash of waves. Even from miles away, the sea has a way of making herself known, of whispering her secrets through the air. I held my husband's old journal in my lap, reading by the dim glow of a lantern. His words spoke of strange things sailors had seen, faces in the fog, voices calling from beneath the water, storms that came without warning. He had always said the sea tested not only a man's strength, but his soul. I closed the book and whispered into the darkness, "What are you trying to tell me, Raphael?" 2 days later, Elias called again. It was early morning. I hadn't even made my coffee. The moment I heard his voice, my heart pounded. "Mom," he said, breathless, "I need you to listen. Lydia disappeared." "What?" I asked, clutching the phone. "From the ship?" "Yes," he said. "Last night she said she wasn't feeling well. I told her to rest in her cabin, but when the steward checked in the morning, she was gone. Her things are still here, her coat, her necklace, everything. We've searched every corner of the ship. There's no trace of her." I pressed a trembling hand to my chest. "Oh my God, Elias, did you tell the authorities?" "We can't until we dock. I've sent messages through the radio, but we're still 3 days from the nearest port. The sea is calm, no sign she went overboard. It's like she vanished into thin air." His voice cracked. "Mom, I swear it was her. She knew everything about us. She even showed me the photo of our wedding that hangs in our bedroom." "Elias," I said softly, "listen to me carefully. Lydia is still here. I saw her yesterday. I spoke to her. She's planning your welcome dinner." There was a long silence. I could hear him breathing heavily, and for a moment I thought the line had gone dead. Then he whispered, "That's not possible." "And yet," I said, my voice shaking, "it's the truth." When the call ended, I sat still for a long time, the phone heavy in my hand. Outside, the wind began to stir again, carrying with it the faint scent of salt. My husband's words echoed in my mind. The sea keeps the truth beneath her waves. I couldn't eat that day. My thoughts tangled between fear and disbelief. Was there truly something supernatural happening, or was my son's mind unraveling after weeks at sea? I couldn't bear either thought. That evening, I decided to visit Lydia again. Her lights were on, and through the window I could see her silhouette moving gracefully through the kitchen. She looked utterly normal, laughing softly as she stirred something on the stove. I hesitated before knocking, my pulse racing. When she opened the door, her expression lit up with warmth. "Mama Elena, what a lovely surprise. Come in. I was just making stew." I stepped inside, my eyes scanning the room. Everything was in place. The vase of lilies, the framed photo of her and Elias, the faint scent of cinnamon in the air. "How have you been, dear?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Fine," she said with a soft smile. "Just missing Elias, as always." "Did he call you recently?" I asked. She nodded without hesitation. "Yesterday afternoon. He said they were nearing the midpoint of the voyage and that the sea was calm. He promised he'd bring me a shell from the Cape." My breath caught. Elias had called me at dawn saying Lydia had vanished. How could she not know? I forced a smile, hiding the storm inside me. "That's wonderful, dear," I said quietly. I sat with her for nearly an hour, sipping tea and listening to her hum a tune under her breath. There was no hint of deceit, no flicker of guilt or confusion in her eyes. When I finally left, the night air felt thick, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I drove straight to the old marina where Raphael's ship had once docked. The place was nearly abandoned now, the wood creaking under my steps, the smell of brine thick in the air. I stood by the edge of the pier, staring at the dark water. The moonlight shimmered across the waves like shards of glass. "Raphael," I whispered again, "what is happening to our son?" And for the first time in years, I thought I heard his voice, faint, distant, carried by the wind. "Find the truth before the sea does." I stumbled back, my heart racing. Maybe it was only my imagination, but the words filled me with dread. The next morning, I went to Father Miguel, our parish priest. He listened silently as I told him everything. Elias's call, Lydia's twin appearances, her disappearance from the ship. When I finished, he crossed himself and said, "There are mysteries, Elena, that reason cannot touch. Sometimes the sea takes what it wants, and sometimes it sends something back that looks the same but is not." His words sent a chill through me. "What should I do, Father?" I asked. He looked at me with solemn eyes. "Pray. And when your son returns, make sure he doesn't go back to sea until you understand who or what followed him home." Elias returned home 3 days later, and when I saw him step off the shuttle at the harbor, my knees almost gave way. He looked thinner, his face shadowed by exhaustion, but his eyes searched for me with the same tenderness that had never changed since he was a boy. I ran to him, and he hugged me tightly, his shoulders trembling as if he'd been holding back the weight of the sea itself. "Mom," he murmured, "I don't know what's real anymore." I held his face in my hands and whispered, "You're home now, my son. That's all that matters." But I knew that was a lie because nothing about our world felt safe or real anymore. We drove back to the house in silence. The sky was overcast, the air heavy with the smell of salt that seemed to follow him. When we arrived, Lydia was waiting on the porch, wearing a soft blue dress and holding a small bouquet of daisies. She smiled, radiant, as if nothing had ever been wrong. "Welcome home, my love," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Elias froze beside me. His eyes widened, and I could see him struggling to breathe. "Mom," he whispered, "that's her. That's the same face, the same voice." Lydia looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" she asked, stepping closer. "Elias, it's me." He took a step back, his hand shaking. "Where were you 3 nights ago?" he demanded. "On the ship you disappeared. You were gone without a trace." Lydia blinked, her expression filled with confusion and fear. "What are you talking about? I haven't been on a ship in months. I've been here, taking care of your mother, planning your welcome." He turned to me, his eyes pleading for answers. "Tell her, Mom. Tell her I'm not losing my mind." My throat felt tight, but I forced the words out. "Lydia, he's telling the truth. He called me from the ship. He said you were there. You even knew things only you could know." Lydia's face went pale, her lips parting in disbelief. "I don't understand," she whispered. "How could that be? I never left." The 3 of us stood in silence, the air thick with something unspoken. Finally, Elias walked past her and into the house, his steps heavy. Lydia turned to me, her eyes glistening. "Mama Elena, I swear I've been here. Please believe me." I touched her arm gently. "I believe that you believe that, dear." That night, the house felt colder than usual. Elias barely spoke during dinner. Lydia tried to smile, tried to ask about his voyage, but every word seemed to drift between them like fog, visible but unreachable. Afterward, Elias went to his old room, and I found him sitting by the window, staring into the night. "She's lying," he said quietly, "or something else is." I sat beside him. "Maybe there's an explanation we can't see yet. Maybe it wasn't her, but someone who wanted you to think it was." He shook his head slowly. "No, Mom. It wasn't just her face or her voice. It was her soul. I could feel it. The way she looked at me, it was Lydia. But when she vanished, something inside me felt hollow, as if part of me was still out there. I didn't know how to respond. Instead, I reached for his hand and whispered, "Then we'll find the truth together." Over the next few days, Elias grew restless. He avoided Lydia, spending most of his time repairing things around the house or walking by the shore. I watched from the porch as he stood facing the horizon, as if the sea might speak to him again. Lydia tried to act as if nothing had changed, but I could see the cracks in her calm. She often sat in the living room, her eyes distant, her fingers tracing patterns on the table. One evening, I found her crying quietly. When she saw me, she tried to hide it, but I sat beside her and took her hand. "Tell me what's really troubling you, dear," I said gently. She hesitated, then whispered, "I've been having dreams, strange dreams. I'm standing on a deck at night, the sea all around me. The air smells of salt and oil. There's a man calling my name, Elias. But when I turn, I can't see his face. Then I wake up, and I feel cold, soaked, like I've just come out of the water." My blood ran cold. "When did the dream start?" I asked. "About a week ago," she said, "right before Elias called you." I squeezed her hand. "Lydia, maybe those aren't just dreams." She looked at me, terrified. "What do you mean?" Maybe some part of you was there," I whispered. "Something we can't explain yet." That night, I couldn't sleep again. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I got up and peeked through the door. Elias was standing there, his face pale, his eyes fixed on the living room. "Mom," he said softly, "come here." I followed his gaze and froze. Lydia was standing by the window, dressed in that same blue coat he had described, her hair damp as if she had come from the rain, but outside the night was dry. "Lydia?" I called softly. She didn't answer. She turned toward us slowly, her eyes glassy, her expression blank. Elias reached for her, but as soon as he stepped closer, she blinked, as if waking from a trance. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Why are you looking at me like that?" He stopped, breathing hard. "Your coat," he said. "It's wet." She looked down in confusion. "I don't know how." Then she swayed, fainting into his arms. We laid her on the couch. Her pulse was steady, but her skin was cold as ice. When she woke up a few minutes later, she didn't remember anything. Elias sat beside her, holding her hand. Tears in his eyes. "Lydia, please," he said softly. "If there's something you're not telling me, I need to know." She shook her head weakly. "I don't understand any of it." I watched them, my heart aching, realizing that whatever had followed Elias home from the sea was not finished with us yet. And somewhere in the distance, I thought I heard the faint echo of waves crashing, not from the shore, but from within the walls of our home. The following morning, the house felt heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Lydia stayed in bed, pale and weak, saying she felt drained, as though something inside her had been taken during the night. Elias brewed tea and sat by her side, gently brushing her hair away from her forehead, but I could see the fear in his eyes. He didn't say it out loud, but I knew he was thinking the same thing I was, that whatever had happened on that ship was now following them on land. Later that day, the doorbell rang. It was Captain Herrera, an old friend of my husband's who had once sailed with Raphael on the Santa Reina. His weathered face bore the same marks of the sea that my son carried now. "I heard Elias was back," he said, his deep voice calm but concerned, "and that something strange happened during the voyage." I nodded, motioning for him to come in. Elias appeared in the hallway, his expression dark. "You heard right, Captain. Lydia disappeared mid-sea, and yet she's here now, as if nothing happened." The captain studied Lydia, who was lying on the couch with a blanket over her. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but in recognition. "May I ask," he said gently, "did she mention anything before she vanished? Any sounds, lights, feelings?" Elias hesitated. "Yes," he said finally. "She said she heard a woman singing outside her cabin, a song she couldn't recognize. Then, when she went to look through the porthole, she saw someone in the water, someone who looked just like her." The room fell silent. Even Lydia turned pale, her lips trembling. Captain Herrera sighed deeply, removing his cap. "There's an old tale sailors tell," he said. "It goes back generations. They say the sea sometimes makes reflections, not just on the surface, but in spirit. If someone crosses her path with a heart divided, the sea takes the part that wavers and gives it a face. A double. The double walks the earth for a time, but it can't stay long. Eventually, the sea calls it back." I felt a chill run through me. "You mean this Lydia could be," he nodded slowly, "a mirror of the real one, or perhaps the other way around. It's never clear which is which." Lydia clutched her blanket tightly. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I'm real. I've always been me." Elias reached for her hand, but his face was torn between love and fear. "I know, my love," he said softly, though his eyes flickered with doubt. After the captain left, the house fell into uneasy quiet again. That night, Elias refused to sleep. He sat in the living room with the lamp burning low, watching over Lydia. I could hear the floorboards creak beneath his pacing. Around 2 in the morning, I awoke to the sound of whispering, At first I thought it was coming from Lydia's room, but as I listened closer, I realized it was coming from outside. The sea, its waves strangely rhythmic, like a chant carried on the wind. I went to the window, and for a moment I thought I saw two figures standing near the edge of the shore, both women in blue coats, their hair fluttering in the same direction. My breath caught. I blinked, and they were gone. The next morning I didn't tell Elias what I had seen. He was already burdened enough. Instead, I went to the small church at the end of the street and lit 3 candles, one for Raphael, one for Elias, and one for Lydia, whoever she truly was. Father Miguel found me there, kneeling with tears in my eyes. "You've seen it too, haven't you?" he asked quietly. I looked at him, startled. "What do you mean?" He sighed. "The sea's calling. When a reflection walks among us, it leaves traces, shadows that linger where there should be none. I've seen them near your house." His words made my blood run cold. "Father, what do I do?" "Stay together," he said. "And when the time comes, you must choose which one belongs here." I didn't understand what he meant until later that evening. Elias had gone out to the harbor to meet some of his crewmen. Lydia insisted on going with him, though she still looked fragile. They left together at dusk, and I stayed home, trying to distract myself with chores. Around midnight, I heard the door creak open. "Elias," I called, but no one answered. I stepped into the hallway and froze. Lydia was standing there, but her clothes were dripping wet, her eyes distant, and her skin glistened as if coated in a fine layer of seawater. "Lydia?" I whispered, trembling. "Where's Elias?" She smiled faintly, but her voice was hollow, echoing strangely. "He's waiting by the water." I ran past her toward the shore, the wind whipping against my face. The moon was bright, reflecting silver on the waves. Elias was standing at the edge of the dock, staring into the water. "Elias!" I cried. He turned, his expression dazed. "Mom, she's in there." I followed his gaze and saw her. Another Lydia, her face just beneath the surface, her eyes open, glowing faintly in the moonlight. She looked exactly the same as the one who stood behind me on the sand. "Elias," I whispered, "come away from there." But he didn't move. The Lydia beside me stepped forward slowly, her bare feet leaving no prints in the sand. "You have to let me go," she said softly. "The sea wants what it created." Elias shook his head violently. "No, you're my wife." She smiled sadly, tears mixing with the salt water on her cheeks. "Then promise me you'll remember me, the real me, no matter what happens." The wind howled. A wave rose suddenly, taller than the dock, and when it crashed, both figures vanished, the one in the water and the one beside me. I screamed, running forward, but Elias grabbed me, pulling me back before the next wave hit. When the water receded, there was nothing. Only the sound of the sea, calm once more, as if it had swallowed its own secret. We searched for her until dawn, but Lydia was gone. The authorities said it must have been an accident, that she had slipped and fallen into the tide, but Elias and I knew better. Something had been taken, and something had been returned. That night, as he sat by the window staring at the horizon, I saw a single seashell resting on the sill, wet, glimmering faintly under the light. He picked it up and whispered, "Goodbye, my love." The days that followed were like drifting through a fog that refused to lift. Elias moved through the house like a shadow, his eyes hollow, his voice barely a whisper. I tried to keep him busy, made him tea, cooked his favorite soups, left the radio on softly to fill the silence, but nothing reached him. The sea had taken something from him that I could never give back. Lydia's absence hung in every corner of the house. Her scarf still hung on the back of the chair, her perfume lingered faintly in the hallway, and sometimes, when I walked past the living room at night, I swore I heard her humming that same tune she used to sing when she cooked. The neighbors stopped by to offer condolences, their voices filled with pity, but none of them knew the truth. They thought Lydia had drowned, a tragic accident. Only Elias and I knew that what had happened was not something the world would ever understand. About a week later, Captain Herrera returned. His expression was somber, his eyes shadowed. He brought with him a small leather-bound logbook. "We recovered this," he said quietly, placing it on the table. "It was found inside a floating crate about 30 miles off the coast." Elias stared at it for a long time before touching it. The leather was warped from water, the pages swollen and stained with salt, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Lydia's delicate script. He opened it slowly, his breath catching as he read the first line. "If anyone finds this, please tell Elias that I'm sorry. I didn't mean to go with her, but she called me by my name, and I couldn't tell which one of us was real anymore." The words trembled across the page as if written in haste. Elias's hands shook as he turned each page. The entries were fragmented, mentions of strange songs, of hearing her own voice whispering in the dark, of standing by the railing and seeing her reflection wave when she hadn't moved. One final entry read, "I think the sea wants balance. Maybe only one of us can exist. If I disappear, tell him to remember me as the woman who loved him, not the shadow that came after." When he finished reading, Elias closed the book and pressed it to his chest. "She was real," he whispered. "I knew she was." Captain Herrera placed a hand on his shoulder. "She was both, son. The sea doesn't take without reason." Elias nodded numbly, his eyes wet. "Then I wish she'd taken me instead." That night, after the captain left, I found Elias sitting by the shore, staring at the horizon where the sea met the sky. I sat beside him without saying a word. The tide was calm, the moonlight silvering the waves. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, "Do you believe souls can split, Mom? That maybe part of us belongs to the land and part to the sea?" I looked at him, the wind tugging at his hair. "I think love can be strong enough to reach beyond this world," I said softly. "Maybe that's what she became, a piece of love that couldn't fade, even when she was gone." He nodded, tears rolling down his cheeks. "I keep hearing her voice," he whispered, "every night, just before I fall asleep. She says my name the way she used to when she was happy. I don't want it to stop." I reached for his hand and held it tightly. "Then let it be her goodbye, not her haunting." Days passed, and slowly life began to return to a quiet rhythm. Elias started working again, repairing boats for the local fishermen. It was as if being near the sea gave him comfort, even after everything it had taken. Sometimes I watched him from the porch, the wind in his hair, and thought how much he looked like his father. Steady, resilient, but marked by the ocean's weight. One afternoon, a letter arrived with no return address. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the ink was smeared, as if the paper had once been damp. I opened it carefully. The words were brief. "Tell Elias that she is safe. The sea keeps her at peace. Do not fear the reflection that comes again. It brings no harm this time." My hands trembled as I read it. There was no signature, no explanation, only that strange message. When I showed it to Elias, he frowned but said nothing. He tucked it inside Lydia's journal and placed them both in a wooden box, which he locked and set on the mantel. "If she's at peace," he said, "then maybe we can be too." That night it rained heavily. The sound of thunder rolled over the sea, and the waves crashed violently against the rocks. I woke in the middle of the storm to the sound of footsteps outside. I rushed to the window and saw Elias walking toward the dock, his lantern swaying in the wind. I grabbed my coat and followed him. When I reached the shore, the rain lashed against my face, and the wind howled like a voice from the deep. "Elias!" I cried. He turned, his eyes wild but calm at the same time. "She's calling, Mom," he said softly. "She says she needs to say goodbye properly." I shook my head, tears mixing with the rain. "No, son, it's just the wind. Please, come inside." He looked at the sea, then back at me, his voice breaking. "If I go to her, I'll come back. I promise." Before I could stop him, he stepped into the surf, the waves rising to his knees. I screamed, running after him, but a flash of lightning blinded me. When I looked again, he was gone. Only the lantern floated, spinning slowly in the dark water. I waded in, calling his name over and over, but there was no answer, only the echo of my own voice carried by the wind. I stayed there until dawn, soaked and shivering, staring at the horizon that had swallowed both my husband and my son. But when the first light of morning broke, I saw something glimmering near the rocks, a small seashell, identical to the one Elias had once kept on the windowsill. Inside it, I thought I heard a whisper, faint but unmistakable. "I love you, Mom." For days after Elias vanished, I could not bring myself to speak. The neighbors came. The police asked their questions, but my answers were empty, things that floated out of my mouth like driftwood. They searched the coast for a week and found nothing. No trace of him, no body, not even his boots. Only that lantern, cracked and rusted, washed ashore 3 days later. I buried it in the garden beside Raphael's old compass and Lydia's favorite lily bush. It felt wrong to dig so many graves for things that were not bodies. But somehow, that's what my life had become. A keeper of symbols, a collector of what the sea decided to leave behind. The house was quieter than ever. The walls creaked differently now, as if the rhythm of the waves had found its way into the wood. I would wake in the night to the sound of footsteps upstairs, slow and measured, just like Elias's. Sometimes I would hear a door open, or the faint melody of Lydia's humming carried down the hall. At first I told myself it was my mind trying to comfort itself. But deep down, I knew it wasn't imagination. The sea had marked this family, and its echo refused to fade. A month later, I received a letter from the Maritime Authority stating that the Marina Estrella, the ship Elias had commanded, had been spotted adrift hundreds of miles from our coast. No crew, no logs, no distress call, just floating, perfectly intact. When I read the report, my hands went cold. They said the captain's quarters had been found locked from the inside. The bed neatly made, and on the desk lay a single seashell, identical to the one I had found near the rocks. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went down to the shore with a lantern and sat there, staring at the dark horizon. The sea was calm again, its surface like glass. "You've taken enough," I whispered. "Please, let them rest." The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of salt and lilies, Lydia's favorite flower. For a moment I thought I heard laughter, a man's and a woman's, mingling with the rhythm of the waves. Then I saw them. 2 silhouettes walking along the water's edge, hand in hand. They were faint, translucent, glowing softly under the moonlight. I knew them immediately. Elias and Lydia. They stopped and turned toward me. I couldn't move. Elias raised his hand, and even though his lips didn't move, I heard his voice as clear as if he were beside me. "Mom, it's all right. We're together now. The sea kept its promise." Lydia smiled beside him, her eyes full of peace. "Thank you for loving us enough to let go." I wanted to run to them, to hold them both, to tell them not to leave me again, but before I could move, the tide came in. When it receded, they were gone, and only their footprints remained in the sand, 2 sets leading toward the water, none returning. I stayed there until dawn, watching the waves erase every mark. After that night, I stopped fearing the sea. Instead, I began to visit her every evening, sitting on the same rock where Raphael once proposed to me. I would talk to them, my husband, my son, and the woman who became both curse and blessing. The sea listened, silent but alive, as if she understood. Father Miguel visited me one afternoon, bringing a small wooden cross. "For your peace," he said softly, placing it on my table. I asked him, "Do you think they found heaven?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe, Elena, the sea is their heaven. Some souls belong to the horizon, not to the earth." His words stayed with me. I began to write again, filling pages with memories. Raphael's laughter, Elias's first steps, Lydia's gentle singing. Writing made me feel like I was stitching together all the pieces the sea had torn apart. One evening, as I finished another page, the house grew strangely warm, and I heard that familiar hum again, faint but soothing. The curtains moved, though there was no wind, and a faint scent of salt filled the air. I looked toward the window and whispered, "You're home." For a moment, I thought I saw their reflections on the glass, Elias smiling beside Lydia, her hand resting on his chest. Then the image faded, and I was alone again, though not lonely, because I knew somehow they weren't gone. They were just waiting beyond the horizon, where the sea and sky kiss. Years have passed since then. The village has changed, new faces, new boats, but the sea remains the same. Sometimes children playing on the shore ask about the small cross by the lilies in my garden. I tell them it's for the ones who love the sea too much to leave her. They listen with wide eyes, not understanding, but one day they will. On quiet nights, when the moon is full and the air is still, I still hear them. 3 voices now, not 2. Raphael's deep tone, Elias's soft laugh, and Lydia's melody weaving between them like a thread of light. It's never sad. It's a lullaby, one that promises reunion, not loss. And though I'm old now, I'm not afraid. I know when my time comes, the tide will rise gently to meet me, and I'll hear them calling my name, not from heaven above, but from the horizon itself. I've already written my last note, the one I keep in my nightstand for whoever finds it after I'm gone. It says, "Do not mourn. The sea only takes what it loves, and she loved us dearly." Sometimes I imagine the moment when I'll finally step into that cool water, the moonlight guiding my way, and I'll see them waiting, Raphael with his steady smile, Elias holding Lydia's hand. I'll take that final step, and the water will close softly around me, not as an ending, but as a homecoming. Until then, I sit on my porch watching the sea shimmer under the twilight, whispering my thanks for every memory she left behind. The wind brushes against my cheek like a kiss, and I know it's them, my family, eternal and free. The sea captain, the faithful wife, the woman who crossed between worlds, and me, the witness who learned that love is stronger than even the waves. When the night deepens and the stars reflect on the water, I whisper one last time, "Good night, my loves," and the sea, gentle and endless, answers back with a sound that is neither wave nor wind, but the echo of their laughter carried home. The story you have just heard has been changed in names and places to protect the identity of the people involved. We are not sharing it to judge, but to help those who, like Elias, Lydia, or even myself, have faced moments when love and loss became one with the sea. Many hearts today are still waiting for someone who drifted away, wondering if the wind might someday bring their voice back. I truly wonder, if you were in my place, would you have let the sea take its course, or would you have dared to call out into the storm until your voice broke? Tell me what you would have done, because every story, like every wave, carries a reflection that might awaken someone else's courage. Thank you for staying with me until this final moment. May God bless your home, calm your storms, and guide you, just as He guided us, toward a shore filled with peace and truth.